All right. Hey, Tim. This is Matt Began with Keller Williams and the Scott Barley team. And obviously, I'm talking to you, Tim.
Yep, Tim Clark with Movement Mortgage. Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for connecting. I think these little Zoom sessions that, we're trying to do are important because, we have some questions that we come across every day
Yep.
and I want to get them answered real time. So I
Awesome.
appreciate
Let's
it.
do that. And I've got my coffee, so I'm ready to go today.
Same. So yeah, the first thing we were talking about is, about the rates. Can you fill us in about the latest thing with rates and maybe some common misperceptions on them?
Yeah. And it's been the news lately, right? So inflation drives rates. We've seen that it's at about 30 years of data, we see that rates are primarily driven by inflation, and inflation has been high. You see it at the gas pump, you see it in your food prices. One of the key indicators of inflation is the consumer price index, and that's reported monthly. So the week of Veterans Day, the Thursday before Veterans Day, uh, CPI came out, and it came out at a much lower rate than people thought. So I'm going to share my screen here and kind of give you an idea of what that looked like in terms of rates. So here's a graph, and you can see that's the Wednesday right there before Veterans Day, and that's when CPI came out. And these are real rates, and these are based on 35% of the loans that are actually locked throughout the country. These aren't
Hmm.
quotes; they're actual locked rates with loans. This company that I see this with, 35%. So it's a really good representation of real rates. So you can see on Wednesday, rates were right around 7% for conforming jumbo and FHA. And you can see right there, we had a drop of about a third of a point. And then they've kind of held their gains throughout that. And that's really important. I think that whenever you have a big drop or a rise in a market, doesn't matter what it is, usually there's a bounce back reaction against that. And we've consolidated the gains that we made this week. We've consolidated, and that's a good thing. I think that people think that markets, interest rates in particular, have these wide swings, right? Half a point a day. And while they do change every day, it's not that dramatic. You see a third of a point drop like we saw last week. That's the largest one day drop since they started actually tracking this in 2009. So rates are much better, and more importantly, they've consolidated, and we'll see what happens with the Fed and inflation going forward. Next CPI is December 13th.
It's a good stat. So my other question is, do you have other options to get interest rates down from the ones that somebody pulls up online?
Oh,
Do you,
absolutely. Great question. That's a real, that's become a thing again. Now, I've been doing this 20 years, right?
Mhm.
And so I've seen a lot of markets and a lot of cycles. And this particular market has brought back what they call buy downs. So you can pay to buy down your rate permanently, or you can do what's called a temporary buy down. So you can do a 3-2-1, let's say. So that means that you buy down the interest rate this year, then it goes up the next year, the next year, the next year to the real rate. And the cool thing about that is with the market that has been cooling a little bit, I think we'd agree on that. We talked about last time. We think market is cooling a little bit from a seller's perspective. Sellers are more prone to accept an offer that has seller concessions in it, right? And those seller concessions can buy down that rate. And so that just becomes a question of how do we best utilize that? And one of the best ways is to do that seller buy down, whether a permanent buy down on the interest rate, or you do a temporary one and hope that rates come down permanently. And there's a lot of talk in our industry about that, and I can speak about that. And refinance later, although that's never a guarantee.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up. So,
Yeah, I went through 2006, 7, and 8, and I had to sit around too many kitchen tables because I do house calls and tell people who got into crappy loans. That was the days when if you had a pulse, they'd give you money to buy a house with no money down. And of course, they had a 2-year prepay on them, and they fixed, and then they started adjusting 2 years. And oh, you're always going to be able to refi because your value is always going to go up. That was the story back then. You'll always be able to refi because your values will always go up. But we know they didn't.
mhm.
And to a certain extent, and I don't want to oversell this or undersell it, there is a thought in the environment and in the industry these days that you can refi, that rates are always going to go down.
Mhm.
And they may, and I hope they do. and I hope that people who are buying right now at 7, 6.5, 6% can refinance at some point in the future and save money on their monthly housing expense. But it's not a guarantee, it's not a certainty, because anybody who tells you they know what interest rates are going to do, you should run the other way because nobody knows.
Yeah, we can't time it. And I think it's just a simple fix of the words of saying you may be able to refinance, you know?
Yeah, I see it a lot in our industry right now. There's just this pervading, good word, pervading idea that, oh, interest rates are going to go down because they always follow inflation. Well, I don't know. Maybe this time it doesn't.
Yeah. And I
Nobody saw
think
the
they're,
pandemic coming.
yeah. And people thought they could time the pandemic and they thought this was, this is that, it's going to do that. And it didn't because you
Yeah.
have supply shortages, you have housing construction going up. If builders slow down, if you have people moving from urban markets, they're going to affect your market, and it's not going to affect things the way you think it is. So,
Yeah. A cool thing that I just saw that was released this week, and you and I haven't talked about this, so this will be news to you.
mhm,
Um, we have the least amount, this is in the New York Times, we have the least amount of housing inventory than we've had in 40 years
mhm.
right now, currently. And so I think that will kind of put a floor to some extent under home prices. We inventory is at some point it becomes a supply demand.
Yeah, and we haven't, talked about that, but I sure we're going to go into it with home prices
Yeah.
and how they are affected. I think the blanket, person thinks that, okay, interest rates go up, home prices fall. Well, we both know that that's not the case because of other factors, right?
Right. When we got, like I just said, we got the lowest inventory we've had in 40 years. This is nationwide, obviously. And then we've talked before about the biggest class, and you were one of these. The biggest social generation is millennials, and they're coming into their prime home buying years. So we've got a shortage of inventory, and we've got a demand still. So I just think people need to look at, and I think you and I always talk about this. Housing is a long-term investment. You're
Yes.
buying a home to live in, and you have to be happy with the price. And you have to be happy with the home. That's just it.
Yep. And then I got some opinion questions for you, Tim.
A lot of questions today.
All right. So you're a lender.
I
How
am.
can people help their net worth? What are some tips that you see, whether it's regards to huge credit card debt
Oh God.
or not consolidating things or trying to buy a house and they're missing a certain factor that would help their credit? What are some good tips?
Well, I think the number one thing, and no one's gonna like this, because I'm gonna tell you to eat your vegetables right now. You got to have a budget.
Nice.
And when people say the word budget, people automatically go, "Oh God," and they turn off. And because people think budget is punitive, and they
Mhm.
think that it's going to tell them how to spend their money, and I don't think that's the right way. It's a psychological thing. It just tells you how you're spending your money. If you want to go to Starbucks, and we've all seen these things, you go to Starbucks and you buy your, whatever that is, and it's full of sugar and 600 calories, and you do that every day, and you can see over amount of years how many that does. That's all that is just saying, hey, track it, and where are you spending your money?
Mhm.
That I think is the number one thing that a person could do, because you can't fix a problem unless you know what the problem is,
Yeah.
right?
I-
So I think the budget is a great thing. And by the way, physician heal thyself, right?
mhm.
I was probably in my 40s. I mean, I always knew where my money was going, but I had a mentor and a coach that in my 40s handed me an Excel spreadsheet, which I still use to this day. And we would track it every month. And then the first month I came in, I rounded the numbers, rounded up.
Mhm.
He handed it back to me. He goes, "This ain't right." And I go like, "Well, that's right. I tracked it, He goes, "No, there's no way all these numbers are clean zeros." And
Mhm.
and that's the level of detail. So I knew
Yeah.
exactly to the penny pretty much where my money was going. I had already had an idea of it because I don't drink Starbucks a lot and all that kind of stuff, and I'm pretty cheap, as you know. Um, but I think that's the number one thing is to have people know where their money's going. And then the second one, there's three, I think. The second, nobody likes these. Nobody likes these. So one, eat your vegetables, get a budget. And if you need a way to do that, please let me know and I'll help. There's lots of online tools too. The second one is nobody's like this. Car payments.
Cool. All right.
I read credit reports for a living.
Mhm.
And I always tell the story. I had a lawyer come in with his wife. and I was staying late at night, and I have an office window, and I look out and I see them come up, and they each came separately, and they're driving really nice cars. I mean, like really nice cars. And I'd already pulled their credit, and I kind of knew what the situation would be. And lawyers, they were making a decent amount of money, and they came in, they want to buy $1 million house. I said, well, you can't. And that was an affront to them,
Hmm.
right? And well, I make this much money. I make this money. I said, why? And why can't I buy this house? I said, well, I saw you come up, and I turned my chair. We both so we could look out the window because they parked right there. It was late at night. I said, that's why, right there, because you're paying $2,200 a month in car payments. And so I think that cars become status symbols in America. And I
Yeah.
think that's fine. I mean, if that's your thing, that's your thing. But understand that's that choice you're making. And that goes back even almost to the budget thing. So I would say, cars, people overspend on cars. They do. So just be aware of it. I'm not telling you not to go buy a really nice car if that's what you want, but understand that a choice you're making is to have the car instead of a home, maybe in many cases.
I'm glad you brought that up. That was actually how, I afforded property. It was giving up a car payment. So, paid off my truck and then was able to purchase a house. And instead of having that cool car, maybe I have a used car, but that money adds up huge monthly. I don't think people understand, but take your car payment out of your budget that you have to spend monthly, and you'll be able to save a lot. You can go out to dinner with your family. You can
Oh,
probably house. There's huge things. So I know there's smarter people out there, but if you're ever interested in your budget, like Tim said, just read some books and think about minimalizing and not spending money to impress people that you don't care about. I think
This
that's
it one of the greatest. It's a great quote. We spend money to impress people we don't know who don't care.
yeah, yep.
It's a
So
great line. And the
I'm
third
glad.
thing, of course, is the obvious one, and this goes back to the budget thing, is
Mhm.
credit cards, right? When you're paying 22, 23% credit interest on a credit card, you think about it, and there's a book behind me in my bookcase that which you and I both love. It's Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, and you think about he gives an example of $50. You go and spend something on $50 on a credit card. Well, it's not $50. That item is not $50. By the time you get them paying for it, maybe 75 or 80 or even higher. So it really, credit is a great tool, and any tool can be used for good purposes and for not good purposes, right? So
Mhm.
you can use credit smartly. It just you just people who get in over their head with it are 22, 23%. It just gets crazy. My I have a story about this. It's one of the great successes of my career. I've had literally thousands of clients at this point. One is my old person who cut my hair, and I bought her home for with her, and whoopsie daisy, and bought a home for her, but I had her credit report, and I'm just looking at her, and every time I went to go get her haircut, guess what she had? She had the Starbucks,
Mhm.
her credit cards were just crazy. And finally, we had a come to Jesus moment, and I was pretty direct with her and said, listen, this is killing you.
Yeah.
It's absolutely killing you.
Mhm.
You can't do this. You can't do this. You're stressed out all the time. This is why. And I sat her down, her and her husband, and showed it to her. And so she started working on it. And every time she paid off a credit card, she'd call me
It's got to be an amazing
and
feeling.
say, Tim, I did this one.
Mhm.
And I'll never forget ever the day when she called me and and told me I just paid off the final one. And I tell you what, now I'm not the most sensitive guy in the world. I think we're all clear on that. We both started bawling. I was bawling like a baby. I mean, I was. It was such an emotional thing, and now we're friends still. I mean, she's 3,000 miles away. I get that call, and she, by the way, she got her house, and now she can be able to buy another house.
Mhm.
She's looking at upgrading, and
Yeah.
she can because she's not carrying that debt load at 22, 23%.
Yeah. It's amazing how high they charge.
Simple budget, car payment, credit cards.
Boom. We're on the same page then. Um,
Usually are.
Another question comes from a variety of different people, but why get pre-approved? So someone calls up,
Well,
they're already looking at houses, or they don't understand why they should get pre-approved. They know a lender,
Yep.
talk to them, go, you know,
Happens all
why?
the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really simple. Do you like stress in your life?
Nope.
I mean, a third of all credit reports in the nation have errors on them.
Yeah.
It's a fact. Um, and by the way, free trip, Credit Karma, Purple Cow, all those things. Yeah, they're okay. It's kind of like a thermometer, but they don't tell you everything. So I always give this example. You know, my wife and I had my identity stolen about 10 years ago, and the first thing you do, of course, is you pull your credit. And Michelle and I, we're on everything together, right?
Mhm.
Right? Like we are one of those families where we're just everybody's on the same credit card. We apply for credit equally. So I pull her credit, and mine was about an 800, and hers was about a 680. Now you know Michelle, and she's pretty anal about paying bills, and thank God she is because I don't pay bills. If we did, I'd have
Yeah.
a 500 credit score because I just been not that detailed. And so I came home and I printed out the report and I'd highlighted her scores and I just tossed them on the kitchen table. I said, anything you want to talk to me about?
Mhm.
Why your score is 120 points lower than mine? Then she hit me in the head with a frying pan, right? And I woke up later. That's a joke. But what had happened was a dentist bill had been misapplied. Somebody, a clerical error at a dentist, had applied somebody else's bill to her account.
Wow.
And we never knew about it.
Hmm.
Never knew about it. We had recently moved from city to city, and this was back in the day, and we didn't have our cell phones, probably like 20 years ago, I guess. And it just the collection it went to collections. We were never notified.
Yeah.
We didn't know.
Yeah.
And so, it was a $152 bill. One is the only thing on her credit report that was negative, and it cost 120 points. So that's reason number one right there.
Yeah.
And number two, you don't know what rates are doing on a daily basis. You don't.
Hmm.
You may not know your options. You and I've talked about that. Maybe you don't want to put 20% down. Maybe you want to put 10% down or 5% down. Maybe you have an option. You've been told you got to go FHA. I'm doing a loan like this right now. You got to go conventional. Well, an FHA loan was a better fit for this person because of the mortgage insurance.
Okay.
So there's number one, you got to have surety. You want to know what your budget is for a house,
Yeah, I
and
think
you
that's
want
number.
to know what your options are. It's that simple.
Thanks, Tim. I
Easy,
appreciate it.
easy.
Um, and then the
And it
last,
doesn't cost you anything.
yeah, I know, right? We work for
It doesn't
free,
cost
right?
you anything.
Um, the last thing is, what are you grateful for this year?
Oh wow,
You could take a minute.
that one is a surprise. Um, it's easy. This one's easy for me. It's very easy. We moved here a year and a half ago, a year ago, a little over a year ago, to be closer to my kids who have settled here. And my mother-in-law, after we lost my parents in 2021, um, I'm grateful for family. I mean, it's eh, the older you get, the more it means.
Yeah.
That's a quote from the world's greatest rock and roll star. The older you get, the more it means. And we have we all have our traditions for family. So I cook the turkey and the stuffing, and we all have our little roles to play, right? And it's really cool. So I'm immensely grateful for that. So I'm going to turn it on you now because you
Uh,
surprised me. What are you grateful for?
I'd say my health is a big thing, and then my friends and family. I kind of say that every day. If I feel healthy or have all my limbs and my head's feeling good and I can work with a clear mind, I feel great and I can provide for, my family. And I'm thankful for my friends because I don't have the biggest family. More of my friends are my family. So I'm super grateful for the nice people that I know and people who, do things for me or reach out to me all the time or are there for me when I need it. That's huge. So.
Awesome. Well, we're going to wrap up then. Maddie, it's great seeing you, man.
Yeah, great seeing you
Great
too.
seeing you. You have a good Thanksgiving. Everybody else out there, have a good Thanksgiving. Be safe. And we will talk again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim.
Bye, Maddie.